Please note, every episode is someone's individual experience. One data point is not representative of everyone's time in the Air Force. Do your due diligence. The views expressed are those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views of the Department of Defense or its components. Welcome back to another episode of the AFSC series, a part of the For the Zoomies podcast, and I'm your host, Andrew Cormier. Today's guest is a 2014 Air Force Academy graduate who went on to become an intel officer. Before his time at the Academy, he was prior enlisted and worked as a maintainer working in munition systems before entering the prep school in 2009. Throughout his career, he has supported ground, air, and space operations through his intelligence collection, and most recently, as a reservist, is a cyber threat intelligence project manager. He also works for Huntington National Bank as a Scrum manager, where he helps employ agile management in civilian cyberspace. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Pete Smith.
Excellent. Thanks, Corm. I appreciate you extending the invite, and I'm really glad to be here.
I'm glad to finally have you on. You reached out probably six to 8 months ago, and life is busy at the Academy, so I appreciate your patience. But here we are today.
Hey, listen, man. I just want to say thank you for doing this. I think it's awesome. I think our long blue line definitely needs somebody like you to tie us all together. So, from the alum side, we appreciate what you're doing.
Well, thank you. I'm trying my best. So, do you think you could take us into what brought you to the Academy? I mentioned you were prior enlisted as a maintainer.
Yeah.
What led you to the Academy?
All right. Yeah. So the journey for me starts with family, as any good story starts. My brother was in the Air Force Academy when I was when I was a junior, senior in high school. And, long story short, I was not competitive enough to get into the Air Force Academy. But coming from northern New Jersey, a community that was heavily impacted by attacks on the World Trade Center on 9/11, that sense of service and patriotism ran deep in our family. So we were looking for ways that I could serve, and wanted to join the military regardless. So coming out of high school, wanted to enlist, right? And ended up picking munition systems. I thought it sounded cool. My recruiter said, "Hey, what do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to be security forces like my family. We're all cops." And she says, "No, you don't. Let me see what else we can get you." She says, "I was security forces. I can tell you right now, it's not something that you'd be interested in." So she vectored me to another option, which was being an imagery analyst, which is a type of intelligence professional in the enlisted ranks. And I said, I don't want to look at pictures all day. I don't know if that's right for me. So I said, what's this thing, munition systems? You're working with bombs all day. I'll do that. She says, all right, you can do that. No problem. We'll get you in. So I went off to basic training at Lackland and had some fun there and did a couple of years enlisted. First assignment was in Misawa Air Base, Japan, working with F-16s, and had a brief stint over in South Korea. Helped to stand up a bomb, what we call the bomb dump munitions area out there, and I got picked up for the Air Force Academy Prep School, and that began my journey at USAF.
That actually sounds pretty similar. My good buddy Joe Cheddar, he was a munitions guy. He builds bombs, and now he's a CE, but sounds like a pretty similar path. He was over at Whiteman. I didn't get in my first time either, so I always try to give credit to people that apply multiple times, because it's that persistence that I think shows admissions that you really want it.
Yeah, it was a unique situation. It's a different vector to take, because you're not looking for that congressional nomination or appointment. You're working through your local commander to write you a letter of recommendation, and you're competing with a number of billets in your matchcom.
I didn't even know that.
Luckily for me, there were the amount of positions that actually get filled I don't think they fill all of them every year. So it wasn't too competitive for me, at least that year.
Mm. Well,
So
that's good. I mean,
I'd say luck was on my side.
yeah, yeah, yeah. While we were talking before, getting this episode prepared, you mentioned something about a story of integrity having to do with the commandant while you were here as a cadet. Do you mind
Oh
sharing that
wow,
story?
yeah, we're jumping right in.
I
Yeah,
just figured since
we're
we're on the
opening the
topic of being a
kimono.
cadet.
Yeah. Okay, so um, yeah, look, as a cadet, it's we all know how important the honor system is. So much of our curriculum is based on that,
Mm,
because the Air Force values integrity above all else, right? Um, and there was a period where I was not living up to expectations of integrity. There were a couple. There was an incident where I flat out lied about it on official documentation, and it stemmed from just the fact of I didn't trust the system. Right? They said, "Hey, just disclose the information. You're not going to get in trouble, and then we'll move on." And I just didn't trust the system, so I lied about it. So at that point, I had two choices. One was to continue the lie or to come clean. Um, and for a few years, I continued the lie. Right, as I had a couple different opportunities to come forward, to come clean with no retribution, and I still didn't trust the system and continued to lie. Um, and then after several years of true introspection and considering what integrity meant to me, going through the curriculum of honor at the Air Force Academy, character and leadership development, right? It meant a little bit more to me. So I wanted to come clean. Another contributing factor was the fact that, I learned about this little thing called the polygraph test, right? You can lie on paper. It's pretty easy to do. It's a lot
mm,
harder to do it when you're strapped to a polygraph. So I knew if I was going to, one, live a life of integrity, and then two, be able to have a successful career, I needed to come clean, right? So um, I did, and I knew the consequences of coming clean and admitting that I had lied a few times, and was willing to accept that risk. Um, I did it anyway, came clean, and we went through the process of a formal investigation into the wrongdoing and my status as a cadet in good standing. And I'd say through good faith of the commandant whose decision it was, they realized that I had truly learned from the curriculum. I was truly sorry that I had done what I did, and that they had good faith that I wasn't going to do it again. So they decided to retain me as a cadet and put me back in good standing, and had an opportunity to start fresh with a clean slate. So
well,
definitely a
by
lesson
no
learned.
means I don't want to paint you in a bad light in front of the audience by like bringing this up first,
Yeah,
but I really appreciate your vulnerability in sharing this because I mean I think every single cadet has been in somewhat of a similar situation where we have the option to do something that goes against our morals and
right.
ethics of this institution, and it's good to hear a story of it actually happening, but then it coming clean. So I really appreciate
Yeah,
you sharing that story.
yeah, of course. And I like to share that story with everybody I talk to about character and integrity. It matters so much, not only on paper, but your soul is better for it. And
Mm,
when you come out on the other side and you're a leader, a genuine leader, authentic leader, and then me in my case as a father and a husband, you want to be uh, genuine and live a life of integrity too. So it's good just to be honest and have that character with firm footing.
yep. This show is much more than exploring just jobs. I really appreciate the leadership and moral lesson that you've provided. So I guess moving on, what part of Intel interested you as a cadet, and did it ring true as an officer?
Yeah. All right. So when I jumped into my my major of political science, I was really exposed to the world of intelligence and intelligence professionals because so many of the political science instructors, at least when I was going through, were intelligence officers. So, seeing their experiences and the way they carry themselves and the things that they knew and what they were exposed to, I said, "Wow, I want to do that. I want their experiences. That looks like fun." Um, because at the end of the day, one thing that stuck out to me was these guys they drink coffee and they know things, right? Like a play on words from Game of Thrones. Um, Drinking coffee and knowing things sounds like a pretty fun job. Um, I'm interested in everything. I could never really nail down one area of true passion, kind of like a jack of trades, master of none. So I was
Mhm.
like, that sounds like fun to me. I want to know all the things. I want to support, Air Force operations through that lens and go find the bad guy. Um, and when I say know all the things, I'm talking about truly everything from technology, whether it's past, current, or future emerging technology, geopolitics, everything about warfare, the nature and the character of warfare, how blue, red, and gray military forces are integrated with governments, human and societal behaviors, history, languages, economics, everything, right? Because it's our job to understand and be able to explain the operational environment to policymakers, commanders, decision makers, and effectively communicate the changes to the operational environment. So it's truly everything. So that's one element of the job, but also looking at the other element, which is management and leadership skills too, right? Knowing how to effectively communicate and collaborate and manage your projects and manage your resources. Um, that is also on your plate as an intelligence
Mhm.
officer. Um, and like I said, looking at their experiences, realizing that intelligence is truly everywhere. It's integrated in every mission of the Department of the Air Force, every domain that we operate in or support, right? Air, space, cyberspace, ground, maritime surface, subsurface. I mean, shoot, we even have sensors in the crust of the earth, right? So we're everywhere. Every function of the military, from acquisitions to operational planning to targeting to current ISR operations, building partner capacity, and that's just in the Air Force realm. And then we go into joint operations where you can find yourself in, supporting special operations or joint staff or combatant commands or combat support agencies. We're everywhere. Um, high demand across the board. So it just seemed like so much fun to have that world of experience.
So that was your experience as a cadet, talking to a lot of instructors who were in the
Yeah.
intelligence space.
Right.
One thing that I hear from cadets a lot, especially people that I hang around with that are looking into intelligence, is they'll hear a pretty cool story about some sort of either one-off or really niche experience in intelligence that's maybe a really rare job that, I don't know, they're basically a spy, like some sort of CIA, or they're working in some really specialized weapons program that only three intelligence officers are involved
Yeah.
with. I don't know. I'm just coming
Yeah.
up with examples out of my ass, but
Yeah. Everybody wants to
um,
be Jason Bourne. Do something really cool,
basically.
right?
And so, was this a situation of, hey, you got what you were looking for from your experience of listening to these officers as cadets, and you actually got that, or did you just get put in a spot and you were just happy to be somewhat assimilated with that community?
Yeah. So just like in high school when I couldn't make the cut to get into the Air Force Academy, I found myself in a similar position at the Air Force Academy. When we were looking for jobs, I wanted to be an intelligence officer, but with the limited billets available for intel and me being at the middle of the pack, it didn't happen. I was
Mm.
not able to get a role as an intelligence officer. So um, my backup was actually pursuing pilot. Um, so, accepted the position, went off to pilot training, and never truly fell in love with it. Um, it was okay. Could I see a career with it? Yeah, sure. Was I thrilled about it? No. Was it my passion? No. Um, I'd say I was blessed with a a pretty nerve-wracking experience in student pilot training on a solo. This is early on, so I was still fresh, but on a solo, I had an in-flight emergency, hit a flock of geese. Long story behind that, but conducted the emergency landing procedure just fine. Everything worked out well. And then subsequent flights after that, when you're tested to do the emergency landing procedure, I just couldn't stick it. I just got shook up
Mm-mm.
every time. Something mentally just uh, wasn't clicking after that. So I had the opportunity to say, hey, you know what, Commander, I don't want to do this. It's not right for me. And they said, listen, you can do that, and you can tell the Air Force what you want to do, but you're going to be up to the needs of the Air Force. And I said, yep, acknowledge the risk. Thank you. This isn't right for me. So I told the Air Force I want to be an intelligence officer, and they said, okay, we have a position open for you. Why don't you come to intelligence officer school? And that began my journey as an intelligence officer. So in a roundabout way, just like getting into the Air Force Academy, I found myself uh, as an intelligence officer, which is what I wanted to do from the get go and was truly passionate about. So it seems to be a reoccurring story for me, doing things the
Yeah,
hard
I
way.
guess
But
it goes to show that you can get what you want, despite what the circumstances initially are. Not everyone firsties are getting their jobs this Friday, and General Clark last week announced that pilot slots are down 20%.
mhm,
So I'm assuming there's going to be a lot of people that are upset. But I guess my interpretation of that is they just want to cut down lieutenants on casual so that the pipeline doesn't become like an even bigger funnel, like
yeah,
clogged. But then as soon as pilot training starts opening up again, I'm sure that they'll start taking pilots maybe a little bit later in their career, like as a second or third year lieutenant potentially. So I guess that's along similar lines of it might not come initially, but if you keep your fingers crossed and work hard,
right,
uh, what
yeah,
you
and
want might
we
come to you.
don't. I know a lot of folks who didn't get what they wanted right out of the academy, and they were blown away with what the opportunity offered them. Right, whether you think you want to be a pilot and then you end up in maintenance or logistics or acquisitions or whatever, and you end up realizing you love it, um, because we understand as cadets, we understand only so much,
Mm,
right? We hear about things, we read about things, but you're truly not going to know what it's like until you live that experience. So a lot of folks end up loving what they end up doing.
mm. Back to intelligence. Obviously, without getting into anything classified, I don't want to press you at all. Can you walk us through the different forms of intelligence collection that you've done specifically and how they were carried out?
Okay. Yeah. All right. So when we talk about intelligence, we have to break it up into a few different parts. Intelligence could be a community, right? The intelligence community. Intelligence can be a product, what you deliver to somebody. Intelligence can be an operation, right? The actual collection. Um, so I'll talk a little bit of smattering of all of that. Um, I think your question was geared more towards intelligence operations. Um,
Okay.
So I think the majority of my experience, and hold on, let me back up here. So when we talk about the intelligence operations, we talk about it in a cycle. Okay, it's never truly ending. It's always repeating itself and going through the wash, starting with planning, uh, to collections, to processing, to analysis and production, to dissemination, and then finally evaluation, which goes back right to planning. Okay. So the majority of my experiences was bookended on either end of actual collection, right? I spent a lot of time doing planning of ISR operations, and then the back end of that, which was production analysis and production and dissemination and evaluation. Um, I actually there's very few of us who get to experience um, conducting actual ISR operations, right? Being on a flight with cans on, collecting the data, processing the data on board in real time, running around with a backpack on with an antenna on it, collecting things.
That's that Jason Bourne stuff you're talking about.
Doing human intelligence in the field, actually like gathering that information. Very few of us actually get to do that. The majority of us are doing the bookended work, and that's where I spent the majority of my time, which was great. It was a lot. It was great exposure. You still get to see and understand the entire cycle because you're part of it. You get to plug into it and you get to work with everybody. Well, like I said, yeah, the majority of my time was planning and analysis and production on the back end.
What does analysis and production of it mean? Does that mean after it's collected, you take it in, apply it to the context of the situation, and try to make a product that warfighters can use? Is that okay?
Yeah. Good question. So after it's collected, it goes through the wash, right? And it's a digital collection. It has to get processed, right? Make sure all the ones and zeros are coming out the other end in the right order. It looks good. The technology is working, all of that stuff, right? Making sure that it's in a readable format for production and analysts to utilize effectively. All right. So folks in A&P shops, analysis and production shops, they take that data and they do exactly what you just said. They apply it to the context of whatever the question was initially. What was the requirement that started the collection, right? Let's answer that question. First of all, are we able to answer that question based on the information that we got? And two, what can it tell us about the battle space, right? And how can it inform our assessments about what the adversary might be doing or did?
Mm.
And then we go ahead and we deliver that to our customers, which can be policymakers, commanders, decision makers, those flyers, those trigger pullers, whoever they might be.
Okay. So now that we have the groundwork of collecting intelligence, what you do with it, do you think when we spoke previously, you gave an actual example, something to do with ISIS and drones. Do you think you could apply that to that story that you told?
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I was given an awesome opportunity when I came out the gates from an intelligence school. I was thrown into a unit that had their hands deep in the counter ISIS fight, and we were responsible for doing nodal analysis or network analysis. So understanding how our adversary, how ISIS was constructed, right? All those entities that ISIS had, whether they were people or places or activities, how were they all connected in a big map that you see on a board, right? With all the red lines in between everything. Our teams are doing that analysis and then producing targeting material or other forms of production that operators could then go employ effects against, right? So we were looking at a very niche target system, very small, a very new type of weapon system that ISIS was employing. They were using the small unmanned aerial systems that you can buy off the shelf in Walmart or Amazon, right? And they were using those for their own intelligence to see where our partners were in the battle space, and they were actually dropping munitions from those unmanned aerial systems as well. So we were charged with understanding their network, who was doing what, how were they getting their resources, who was calling the shots, where were they, and then building the targeting material that operators needed to go prosecute those bad guys, right? So there was one instance where we were tied very closely with an ISR platform that figured out where the bad guy was, okay? And we were able to track the bad guy as they were moving along. Yeah. So we were following this guy, okay? And like I said, we assessed it to be the bad guy, okay? So we were following him with a unnamed ISR platform, and we were about to lose custody of that platform. So then we were going to lose him. We weren't going to be able to follow him anymore. And I was leaning over I was on the phone with our strike team, with our fire cell, who was going to go ahead and employ effects against that bad guy if we provided that recommendation, provided that assessment saying yes, confirmed it's bad guy. But I was talking with my NCO to my right, who had been sitting there for months trying to understand the signature of the adversary, right? He knew exactly what the bad guy looked like and how they operated. And he said, boss, I just don't have a good feeling about this. It doesn't satisfy all of the signatures that we typically see, right? So I just don't feel 100% on this. So, I have Fire's team in my ear asking me what's going on. What do you think we should do? And we just said, hold, hold, hold. And, on the other line is the pressure from the ISR coordinator saying, hey, we're going to lose custody of this here in a second. And just as we were about to lose custody, we found the bad guy go into the camp go into their home camp, and it ended up not being ISIS. We'll just say that. Okay, so if we had provided a faulty recommendation or a faulty assessment, it could have been opened up a whole can of worms, right? And gotten us into a lot of trouble had we not trusted the gut feeling, trusted the assessment of our NCO, who was in near real time providing that critical assessment. So that's one of my favorite war stories, is the time where we actually didn't end up blowing up anybody. Right, when we actually didn't do something, it actually ended up saving the day.
That's so interesting. It shows how murky the waters really were in GWAT, because you don't really know who you're fighting, and nobody wants to commit a war crime or anything where you're going to have some sort of CNN factor. So I think that's a really interesting story. Like you said, you didn't end up like employing effects.
When we looked at nation state warfare, it's a lot simpler in nature because there's uniforms and there's symbols and there's flags. It's not so easy in counterinsurgency, counterterrorism operations. And even now we have actual gray space, what we call gray space in state on state competition, right? Where it's hard to attribute certain actions to a specific adversary. So the challenges still exist even outside of.
On the topic of, I guess, being deployed as an intelligence officer, I'm assuming, this is with my limited knowledge of intelligence officers can deploy and be on the ground with their operators in collecting intelligence, but they could also be stateside collecting intelligence and giving it to that same group of warfighters who are downrange. How exactly does that work from being what are the differences between being there with them and being halfway across the globe?
Yeah, so a lot of it depends on what your mission is and who you're assigned to. It's going to necessitate whether you need to be in theater or you can be virtual remote. But I'd say the majority of Air Force intelligence enterprise is supporting the warfighter through reach back distributed operations, right? We are not sitting side by side with the folks downrange or wherever they might be. And that is one of the biggest advantages that we have. The U.S. and advanced Western militaries is our ability to have that global integrated ISR capability, right? The technology and the resources that we have in order to communicate and conduct operations with folks across the world in almost near real time it's incredible, right? Our ability to rely on the fiber backbone, but also the satellite networks is incredible, and it's a great resource that we have, a great advantage that we have. Our adversaries don't enjoy that type of global interconnectedness, at least not yet, and we hope they never do.
Hey, real quick, hope you're enjoying the episode. If you are, could you do me a favor and follow and leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and also follow the show on Instagram at 4.the.zoomies to see clips of upcoming episodes and stay engaged with the community. Thanks for your ongoing support. So we have this capability that not a lot of other people have, but does that communication, because I think we all run into problems where miscommunications happen because it's not happening face to face, rather over a screen.
Right.
Are there still communication issues that exist that could be detrimental in communicating?
Right. Yeah, certainly. So we see this not only in military intelligence situations, but really the world that we live in now, ubiquitously across industry and everywhere, is the virtual and the remote status quo. In my civilian capacity, which we haven't addressed yet, right? I'm a reserve officer, so in my civilian capacity, I work completely remotely with a team out of Ohio, right? And a lot of my job depends on the nuances and the nonverbal communications and building that team from that perspective, that intangible perspective. And it's
Mm.
so hard to do it remotely. It's so hard to develop a team remotely and virtually. So that is definitely one of the biggest challenges that especially intelligence professionals have, is developing those relationships, having very, very tight, clear communication, especially if it's distributed operations where there's 24-hour coverage and you're handing it off from one side of the world to another. There has to be, very, very good, solid communication between those organizations in order to ensure that we have that 24-hour coverage and we have solid communication. So virtual teaming is a huge challenge that takes a lot of commitment, a lot of resources. It takes getting up and getting out, taking a flight, and going to meet your counterparts across the globe, as often as necessary to establish those relationships, so that you guys can have that human relationship, benefiting from that human element of truly understanding the person that you're working with over the phone or via email, right? It just makes for a better relationship and more effective cohesion to accomplish the mission
Mm.
together.
Yeah, I often talk about a high trust environment in the military, especially when it comes down to collecting intelligence in warfighters, where there's a pretty quick OODA loop going on there. That, like I said, a high trust environment, you have to be able to really trust your counterparts that are either supplying information or you're getting information from. Um, and it sounds like there are ways that this miscommunication is mitigated, which I'm glad that the U.S. is investing in, because we can't really afford to make mistakes based off of something that I wouldn't call menial, because it is a big problem, but can be so easily overlooked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think sometimes we have to find that fair balance between virtual resources, those solutions, and the need for face-to-face human interaction. Right? There's
Mm,
there's there's a good balance between the two, and it's just a constant back and forth as far as what is the right combination of the two to satisfy the current mission in the current environment. And I think that pendulum's always swinging. But
yeah.
yeah, I would say that it is one of the best ways to mitigate the breaks in virtual teaming is to get out and meet those people face to face and have an opportunity to build those relationships, and then go back, and continue that virtual teaming. But it's at a more intimate, tighter uh, relationship from then on.
We'll move on to your experience in the reserves. So, do you think you could start us off with what guided you to enter the reserves?
Yeah, so that was almost entirely based on strategic, personal, family life choices. We thought it was a good opportunity to start a new career where we were in life, based on our age. You're not getting younger by the day, but older, so you're missing out on good opportunities potentially to start something new. Uh, where you are in life. But our kids were getting older and grandparents were getting older too, so we thought it was a good time to settle down. So that
Mm,
was that was the decision to punch from active duty and get into the reserve. And I, another I guess another reason was I was trying to find work doing cyber threat intelligence in the Air Force, and also we wanted to get to Europe, and neither of those things really ended up happening. Um, so you couple in the other strategic factors, and it was just another reason to punch and forge our
mm,
own way through life. Luckily, I found an opportunity to work cyber intelligence in Germany. So that's my current assignment. So not only did I end up doing what I wanted to do functionally, but also where I wanted to. And I'm doing that as a reservist.
Well, it sounds like everything worked out for you.
Again, another piece of luck, right?
A quick tangent. I'm assuming intelligence it has a lot of skills that carry over to jobs that in the civilian sector people are looking to employ you pretty rapidly. Is that correct?
I think one of the main reasons why cybersecurity and cyber intelligence was so appealing to me was a piece of mentoring that I got a few years before I decided to transition. Was, hey, if you're gonna make the pivot, find something that's hyper growth and quasi recession proof, right? So you look across the board, and information technology, cybersecurity, those things rank up there as far as job security.
Mm,
But it's just a lot of fun. We have a lot of skills in the military across the board, no matter what AFSC you're in or what rank you are. You have skills that are naturally translatable to cybersecurity. And
mm,
there's a million and one different resources out there that explain those things and how to translate those things that I won't get into right now. But it's a great place for veterans to be.
mm. And an interesting thing that we discussed prior to the episode was how reservists are kind of like civilians, how they provide continuity in the military, but specifically reservists, they contribute this factor of, okay, what's going on in the like private sector where a business cannot function without getting profits. So they employ pretty, I don't know, they companies that survive employ useful tactics,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
reservists give the opportunity to bring those tactics into the military where, we're funded by a, a government budget where it's less of a like a tactic cycle.
Hmm.
So do you think you could bring us into what you do as a scrum master and what you bring to the military through your reservist capacity?
Okay. Yeah. I think reservists across the board, they um, they supplement the total force, right? They provide that increase in volume when needed, when called upon during a campaign, and those are typically the traditional reserve units that can provide that increase in volume um, to whatever campaign that you're currently in. But then you have individual reservists like myself. We're called IMAs, which supplement active duty units, right?
Mm-hmm.
Specific positions at active duty units. We supplement them um, to provide, a second set of eyes or to provide some relief for our active duty counterpart, so that they can go and do professional training, or they can get deployed, or they can take some well deserved time off, right? So we can come in and provide that supplementary impact to the
Okay.
unit. Now, like you said, yeah, we come in with this otherworldly experience that, if you're in active duty for so long, you may not have experience outside of that. Like I never did. My entire adult life I was in active duty military, so that's the world that I knew. Those are my parameters, right? um, so the norms in the societal and the technological norms, I was only so aware of outside of my left and right boundaries within the military. And then I left and was exposed to a completely different world, right, of workplace norms and culture and technology, um, that I'm able to bring to my active duty units when I'm on orders, right? And one of those things that I try to bring, well, two things really is, um, I try and specialize in cyber threat intelligence in the reserves, right? So I try and bring that different, the lessons learned from corporate America or the corporate world, and the open source material that we have available to us out there, and bring that to the active duty unit from a different set of eyes, different perspective, right? But also workplace management, project management techniques. The Air Force, the military is trying to be much more forward with their program and project management. to be much more agile in nature where it makes
Mm,
sense. And this is a place where me as a Scrum Master in my civilian capacity can bring some value to those active duty units, right? Um, Agile project management is all about continuous process improvement, right? And working for the federal government, you're never going to have all of the resources that you want or usually need to accomplish the mission. You could always
mm.
use more with less, or do more with less, I should say. And agile project management reduces the risk of wasted resources to rapidly deliver valuable solutions to customers and make them satisfy them on a more routine basis than old traditional project management techniques would allow. So bringing those mechanisms and that perspective to an active duty unit, which may not be exposed to that continuous process improvement philosophy, is a value added too. Now, that's not to say that there's no formal mechanism in the Air Force for continuous process improvement. In fact, they just revamped it, and now it's called CI squared, continuous
Mm.
improvement and innovation, and it's growing a lot. It's becoming much more well known and implemented across units. So there is growth there. So taking that the notions from that program and combining that with my experience as a Scrum Master, working in agile projects and agile environments, um, we hope that there's some value added to the active duty units that we support.
Do you think that you could jump into what agile is a little bit more? Because the last time we talked, it sounds as though it's applicable to every leadership position, which is almost every
Mm-hmm.
career field as an officer. So, do you think you could jump into that a little bit more?
Okay. Yeah, it could be applicable. It depends on what makes sense for your mission or your product that you're trying to deliver. Um, we have different ways that we manage projects. Okay. Um, Traditionally, there was what we call the waterfall project management solution, which is identifying the requirements, coming up with a way forward, executing the project, so creating whatever you need to create, and then delivering it to the stakeholder at the back end. And that might take weeks, months, years to deliver, right? And then at the end, when you finally deliver it to them, they say, well, actually, this is obsolete. It's actually not what we needed in the first place. So therefore, either go back to the drawing board or we're going to go find somebody else to solve the problem for us, right? And at that point, you've burned through so many resources,
Mm,
money, people, time, and you don't have the right solution. So in some areas, it works well. Okay. In some areas, though, especially in software development, um, there needed to be a way to incorporate feedback much faster and provide incremental solutions along the way instead of waiting till the end to provide a whole solution, right? Um, so that's where Agile kind of came in and said, okay, we're going to break this up into bite-sized chunks. And okay, stakeholder, here is part of your solution. It's a little bit of value. Give me feedback. I'm going to incorporate that feedback into the next iteration, and we're going to keep building on that indefinitely until you are totally satisfied and we can all walk away happy.
okay.
Um, so it's really a risk reduction mechanism to ensure that we're satisfying the customer and reducing waste along the way.
Okay. Yeah. In my conversations with acquisitions officers, they often speak about how their engineers are always trying to get 100% effective um, products, but they end up being either way over budget or way over time. And I think what you're hinting at here is that Agile is coming up with a 75%, 80% solution that still gets it done effectively enough, but it's first and foremost like under time. So you're way ahead of schedule so that, like you said, you can get these iterations pumped out and we're not waiting twice as long to get a product that the engineers deem as 100% effective, but even the warfighters
Yeah.
may think it's not completely.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's, under time, under budget, or under scope or anything like that when you look at the tripod of project management, those three factors, but because you're going to give yourself a period of time to accomplish the work. Usually it's in 2 week increments. So
Okay.
you tell your stakeholder, look, in these next 2 weeks, I can deliver you XYZ. All right. So then you deliver that piece of value, and then they provide you with a review and like, hey, this worked, this doesn't work. I wanted purple instead of blue. Go back and redo it. But it's not a year later; it's 2 weeks later, right? So you're reducing the risk of further waste down the road.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
it's really at the end of the project, at the very end of it, you delivered value along the way and minimize risk instead of waiting the entire time and then having to go back and start fresh.
Okay.
It's all about continuous process improvement, right? And like I said,
Mm.
the Air Force has that theory in place. Like every commander is responsible for identifying opportunities for process improvement, right? So for something that our cadets who are listening can take away is like, hey, how do I provide value to my unit as a second lieutenant? Like this might be an area that you can consider, right? I mean, you may not be the technical expert in whatever you're supposed to do,
Mm.
so maybe you can find a way to improve the system as you're learning the process. Ask, why do we do that? Does that make sense? Is there a way that we can, you know, uh, minimize the risk of wasted resources along the way? And then provide those recommendations to your commander and say, hey, I think we found a way to save some time, save some money, save some other resources
Mm.
for the unit, right? Yeah, and that's not going away anytime soon. That's a need that is echoed from the top down
Mm.
across the federal government, right? And in the corporate world too. Everybody's looking to save resources,
Yeah.
especially in this time of upcoming possible austerity, right?
Yep.
So it's always a good thing to figure out a way to do things better.
By way of rounding out this episode, do you think you could give some advice for cadets considering a similar path as you?
Okay. Yeah. I don't think I'm going to say anything new that our parents haven't said already, or instructors haven't said already, or other alumni haven't said. But from my perspective as an intelligence officer and where I am in my career, I'd say learn as much as you can about everything. Right? Like have that thirst for knowledge, because as we know, knowledge is power. And you walk outside Mitchell Hall, it says man's flight through life is sustained by the power of his knowledge. Right? We all know that, and that's true. Right? The more experience that
Mm.
you have, the more you realize that that's true, especially as an intelligence officer, to give the commander what they need to be effective in the battle space. Two would be to build and nurture a network, a powerful network. Never burn bridges, because you never know when you're going to need somebody else. Um, and if you can't be friends with somebody, don't burn the bridge. Right? Just leave it. Um, but build and maintain that network, because you're gonna see some folks on the outside, and you're gonna need those people. You're gonna need to rely on each other. Um, I can't tell you the amount of times where you're walking in the hallway and you see somebody from school, and you're like, oh, I know you. Where are you working? Oh, I need this. I need XYZ from your team, or maybe you can help me out with this project. Especially as an intelligence officer, so much of it is about collaboration and cross team relationships. And that actually brings me to my next point, which is relationships and collaboration. Like that is so critical to being to being a successful officer in general, but especially within the intelligence world. One of my old bosses used to say, your best day, you can tell if you had a great day if your feet and your throat are absolutely sore at the end of the day, because that means you were walking around and you were talking to everybody. Right? So if your feet and your throat are killing you at the end of the day, it was probably a good day.
Mm.
Um, and then look, career success for anybody is value delivery, right? If you figure out what your boss needs, and you deliver value often, then you're going to succeed. I mean, that's a very vague thing to say, okay? But when you look at how we are evaluated as officers, first and foremost, the highest weighted factor is what value did you deliver. So you could do a lot of volunteer hours, and you could do a lot of things for your community, and you can do all of these other things. That's great, but at the end of the day, they're looking for you to um, support operations and deliver value. So just keep that in mind.
Would you be open to cadets reaching out to you if they have any questions about intelligence or any of your experience in
Of course.
the operational Air Force?
Yeah, absolutely. Great. I'm glad you brought that up. So I can be reached on LinkedIn. That's a great resource for me if anybody's on there. /PeteSmith59 is where you can find me. You can probably drop it in the show notes. But I'm also on the USAF mentorship program too. So if anybody's looking for a mentor out in the wild, you can find me there too.
Awesome. Well, sir, thanks again for what you giving your time to the show and also for everything you do for our country. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been a great ride, and thanks for inviting me on the show. This is great what you do. We appreciate you.
Of course.